Oil prices have slid to an almost 6-year low. Among the main factors fueling the low price is oversupply.
Russia is on the verge of sinking into its second recession in 5 years.
The Russian economy, which is ice cold and could mean big problems for President Vladimir Putin.
Russia's economic woes worsen as the ruble suffers its biggest one-day fall in 16 years.
With the severe drop in oil prices, you now see Russia heading into recession.
Ezekiel 38 is dealing with one of the most difficult times to the nation of Israel. And it has to begin with that isolation that I talked about. Because no one would come to help us beside God. And I want you to know that Ezekiel 38 speaks of the fact that we are safe, secure, and prosperous. Israel has never been safer than it is now. Israel has never been more secured. Israel's economy has never been better than it is right now. And we are so prosperous, as we found lately, trillions of cubic feet of natural gas off the shores of the Mediterranean. So much so that suddenly Russia says, whoa, we want a stake in that gas. President Putin boarded his big plane and landed in Tel Aviv and rushed to the Prime Minister's office in order to talk. And we thought he's going to talk about Syria, Iran. All he talked about is gas and oil. That's what he wanted. And we told him no. And he got back home and put on high speed his collaboration with Iran. Now Ezekiel is giving us a detailed list of all the countries that are about to attack Israel. He says Persia, which is Iran of today, and we all know Iran is up there, we're ready, they're working on it right now. He says Magog. Did you know that in China there's the Great Wall, and the Arabs call it the Wall of Magog? Because they actually talk about the fact that it's defending China from Russia. Rosh stands for Russia. So speaking of that leader that will come from Russia, joining forces with Persia, and then he talks about Ethiopia, which is Sudan of today. Sudan suffered from several Israeli strikes in the last 4 years as a result of smuggling weapons from Iran towards them. We even found out that the Iranians built within Sudan a big factory for bombs and missiles. So Israel sent several F-15s just about a year and a half ago, and we destroyed it on the ground. We never said anything. You never heard anything. Nobody knows about it. They never admitted that they had it. We never admitted that we attacked, and it's gone. But they have an open score. They want to settle that account, and they will join that which will come against Israel. And if that's not enough, we have Libya, and we also have Gomer and the house of Togarmah, which is Turkey of today. A country that used to be our ally and yet turned against us ever since Erdogan became prime minister, and now he's even the president. Openly vowing to put an end to the Zionist entity. Ladies and gentlemen, countries on the stage of the UN are calling for the destruction of Israel, and nobody says a word. And they're plotting. For the first time in the history, Iran and Turkey and Russia are collaborating. They never collaborated before, ever. They hate each other guts. Shiite Muslims don't like Sunni Muslims. They don't like the Russians don't like Shiite. Shiite don't like Sunni. Sunni don't like Russia. I mean, they all hate each other. But for one common goal, they're willing to come together. They're plotting, and it's right now. It's not 10 years ago. It's not 5 years ago. It is right now. For the first time, Ezekiel 38 comes to such vivid form that we cannot deny it.
The oil keeps flowing, but the price keeps on falling. A barrel of oil is now worth more than half what it was last summer. And that's putting huge pressure on US energy companies. Two of the biggest, Chevron and ExxonMobil, were hit hard this earnings season, posting disappointing results well below expectations. But that, it seems, is a sign of the times.
We had kind of an era of scarcity of crude oil, and we may be moving into a longer period where we need to get used to the idea that crude oil might not go back to $90 or $100 per barrel, and you might have to get accustomed to, say, $60 or maybe $70 per barrel over the next 5 to 10 years.
Even those prices seem a distant dream, with barrels currently coming in at the mid-40s. Demand from the world's largest energy consumer, China, also seems to be dwindling. Market volatility and its devalued currency have only pushed prices lower.
China was providing a great deal of demand. They were doing a great deal of buying of the oil. And with the recent chaos in the stock market, there's been more uncertainty about what's going to happen to China.
China stunned the world's financial markets Wednesday by devaluing its currency for a second consecutive day, triggering fears its economy is in worse shape than investors believed. Let's go now to Rob Armstrong from the Financial Times. Rob, great to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Why is China doing this?
Well, I think the crucial point is that their economy is slowing. There's a lot of talk about whether this is an effort to bring market forces into their formerly closed economy. I don't think that's the point. I think the interpretation that everyone is giving this, and the most likely interpretation, is that their economy is slowing much more quickly than originally anticipated, or anticipated just a few weeks ago.
Okay, we're looking now at the July exports from China down 8%.
Yep. And there's a host of other data you could look at, too. Things like electricity generation, car sales, construction square footage. All the data looks fairly bad.
Is it bad for American companies that export goods to China?
Yeah, I think it's bad for American companies that export goods. And it goes further than that. I mean, if you look at the American equity indexes like the S&P 500, those indices are filled with companies that are very international. So it's not just straight exporters. A lot of these companies do business in China itself. Yum Brands has thousands of restaurants in China, for example, Kentucky Fried Chicken or Pizza Hut and so on. So it's not just down to exporters. It's all across the S&P 500 that is going to feel the impact.
Greek debt is not the only thing keeping European finance ministers awake at night. The latest growth figures out of the region are sparking fears about the state of the global economy. The French and German economies both slowed more than expected in the second quarter.
Now, the low crude price has indeed put a strain on Russia's finances, but what's the impact for the rest of the world? Igor Piskunov now takes a look.
Recession, an ice-cold economy. The mainstream media has painted an apocalyptic picture of the Russian economy. And true, it is largely dependent on the price of oil, but it's far from being alone. I'm joined by investigative journalist Tony Gosling for more on this. Tony, thanks a lot for joining us. Don't you think that perhaps too much attention is being focused on Russia in this situation right now?
Well, that's the whole purpose of most of the mainstream press here in the Western world, is to focus attention away from the problems at home. So when I see problems with the ruble, and I just immediately look at it as economic warfare. The Western financial elites want to see Russia suffer. They've failed in some of their efforts in Ukraine, and this is a way of getting back at the Russians without actually using military might. There's all sorts of types of warfare nowadays, and economic warfare is one of them.
I want to give our viewers a few examples of how international companies are being affected by the falling oil prices. For instance, France-based, largest in the world oil field service company is expected to write off $800 million. Now, UK's Tullow oil company, its shares have went down by 50%, and the same goes for U.S. Continental Resources, all since August and June when the oil began falling, and this list goes on. Tony, do you think that this is a situation concerning only the energy sector, or other sectors may be affected by it as well.
This is an example of what's happening is the chaos and sickness in the euro-dollar zone, that is in the financial sector, from the casino economy, that stocks and shares and asset prices, is now finding its way into the real world and into the energy market. But it won't take long, of course, for it to go from there into the rest of the economic field in the real world. So all of the gambling that's been going on at the international casino is now really hitting the international resources markets, the energy markets, and commodities.
And it's not only about markets or international corporations, is it? The pockets of ordinary people are being hit. Norwegian krone went down by 17% against the dollar, and the budget of Denmark is facing a deficit. So these are countries which are being affected by the falling oil prices. And this is another thing, Tony, that mainstream media is not really talking about, is it?
Well, the job of the mainstream media is to talk up the financial markets so that people keep their money in those stocks and shares. But actually what's happening is unpayable debt is killing the world economy.
The whole world can smell a soon collapse. I'm talking to people all over the world. I'm talking to people not only in America, but also in Europe, in Asia, in Australia. And I'm not talking about believers only. Everybody understands that there is a soon collapse. And when I say collapse, I'm not necessarily talking about spiritual one. I'm talking about financial collapse. I'm talking about physical collapse, political collapse, and even a spiritual one, of course. Financial collapse. Be not mistaken and understand that the central banks around the world are almost at the very bottom of interest rates, which is a tool for them to fight financial crisis. Now, just about a few weeks ago, in June 28, 2015, I read on the Telegraph of the UK, the world is defenseless against the next financial crisis, warns BIS, the Bank of International Settlements, which is the central bank of the central banks. And what he says is that the monetary policymakers have run out of room to fight the next crisis with interest rates unable to go lower. Ladies and gentlemen, you need to understand the crisis is around the corner because the Federal Reserve is printing dollars like crazy. They don't care about you. The Federal Reserve is a privately owned bank by wealthy families that intend to create crisis in order to promote their own agenda of one world government with one world currency and one world religion. And everybody's blinded to see that.
And the State Department continues to point the finger at Bashar Assad's government for Islamic State's advance. That's even after a former US intelligence chief admitted that the American government knew its policies would lead to the rise of ISIL. Let's get more on this now from RT's Gianni Chikian. Gianni, what has been revealed then?
Well, the former director of Defense Intelligence Agency, Michael Flynn, said back in 2012, U.S. policymakers had the intelligence saying that the major driving forces behind the insurgency in Syria were extremists, but supported the insurgency anyway.
Who wasn't listening?
I think the administration.
So the administration turned a blind eye to your analysis.
I don't know if they turned a blind eye. I think it was a decision. I think it was a willful decision.
A willful decision to go support an insurgency that had Salafists, Al-Qaeda, and
a
Muslim
willful
Brotherhood.
decision to do what they're doing.
Well, I went to the State Department to ask about this willful decision, but received the State Department's default answers to almost all questions related to Syria, and that is, it's all Assad's fault.
Would you admit, like Michael Flynn did, that in 2012 the U.S. supported the rise of the forces that we now call ISIL in order to defeat Assad?
I'm certainly not going to talk to an intelligence report that I haven't seen. The rise of ISIL inside Syria was in fact helped by the Assad regime's lack of legitimacy to govern effectively its own people and its own territory.
Overnight, several arrests made as rocks and frozen water bottles were thrown at police. Protesters taking to the streets, blocking traffic. Authorities earlier declared a state of emergency in Ferguson.
Give us some room. Give us some room. Back up.
As protesters continue for a second night surrounding the anniversary of Michael Brown's death. Police lining up in riot gear.
We're the people that run towards danger instead of running from it.
Around 2 a.m., a puzzling scene. A small group of heavily armed men walked into the crowd of protesters, calling themselves the Oath Keepers.
Everybody has a right to be safe and secure in their person and things.
The men say they're protecting rioters with InfoWars, a site run by conspiracy theorists. They say police are leaving them alone. Earlier on Monday, protesters shut down an interstate in St. Louis.
Many of the people who have their own agendas, who do wish to escalate violence, they mix in with a lot of the peaceful protesters. So it is difficult, and particularly for law enforcement who has no idea, oftentimes, who is who.
Tensions growing after a reported 4 shootings Sunday night. 18-year-old Tyrone Harris remains in critical condition after being shot by police late Sunday.
Please get him some help.
Race against time in China. Tonight they are still frantically digging an urgent search for survivors after those powerful explosions felt miles away, the blinding white light and the boom. As we've been showing you here in the last 24 hours, entire neighborhoods went up in flames, at least 50 now dead, hundreds injured. And 24 hours later, look at this tonight. The rubble still smoldering and a parking lot incinerated. Cars burned out, only their shells remain there. Tonight, officials now testing the air for deadly chemicals. And ABC's Bob Woodruff in China taking us right to the scene.
New video tonight showing the massive blast lighting up the night sky. Shot by an American, Dan Van Duren, running for his life.
Let's go!
And today, the view from above shows fires still burning. Row upon row of burned-out cars, piles of crumpled shipping containers.
Looking in here, there's still smoke. It's still burning. There's flames in there.
Whole buildings now reduced to twisted metal.
These are people's homes. This is where they lived. Look at this. Here's the fan of their room.
We passed exhausted firefighters, 1,000 descending on the scene, searching for the dozens of people still missing tonight. More than 50 are dead and 700 wounded. The blast sending neighbors into the streets in just nightgowns. American Michael Doherty watching from his window.
The big one hit and thought the whole building was coming down.
The force as strong as 21 tons of TNT.
I would say we're probably almost a mile away, and look at that power of that blast.
Tonight, patients pack hospital hallways. Long lines of people wait for clothes.
And battered cars drive empty highways.
At the hazardous chemical storage facility where the fire began, teams in hazmat suits are testing the air. Many people on the streets today wear face masks. And tonight, students light candles for all who were lost.
5 days after the blast, the top mission is moving to cleaning up the area. A chemical biological incident response force and a leak treatment team are advancing their search for hazardous substances. A sand and stone cofferdam has been put in place within a 500-meter radius of ground zero. So far, work in the area within a distance of 2 kilometers from the blast site has been done, and screening in a larger area is underway. But things are more complicated than that.
There are some 80,000 containers around the blast center. They may be contaminated by toxic chemicals. We've finished clearing outside of the containers and we will start clearing the inside part of the containers from today.
The goal is to wipe out all of the chemicals before any rain falls. Among thousands of questions concerning the blasts, the one that most urgently needs an answer is how bad is the environment around the explosion site.
Results from 7 mobile environment and air quality monitoring stations outside the evacuation zone from the blast site show that there were no signs of new pollutants.
The explosions have affected 17,000 households and 1,700 businesses. At least 6,000 residents have been displaced. The State Council established an investigation team, and there are a lot of answers for the team to figure out. What was the cause of the blast? Whether Ruhai International Logistics Cooperation violated the law, and when the thousands of residents displaced by the explosions can have their normal lives back.
We want to take you straight to Bangkok, Thailand, where a large explosion during the evening rush hour has killed at least one person, according to the Associated Press. You are looking now at a live Periscope feed from a Voice of America reporter on the scene there. Footage is still continuing to come in, as are details of this. Other agencies, including Reuters, reporting at least 12 killed in this explosion in Bangkok.
There is horrifying video out of southern China. A massive sinkhole opened up as cameras were rolling. It happened after an underground tunnel collapsed. The road was sucked into the ground, creating a crater more than 3,000 square feet. One person has been killed.
Airline tragedy, this time in the skies over Indonesia. A plane packed with passengers suddenly disappeared from radar. The Indonesian airline, flying with a troubled safety record, even forbidden from flying anywhere over the European Union. Tonight, the search for that plane and those passengers. ABC's Jennifer Eggleston joins us now from London. Jennifer, good evening.
Tom, it's a routine commuter flight just over 170 miles in Papua, eastern Indonesia. But just 10 minutes before touchdown, the plane vanished. The flight was heading into the airport in Oksibel. 54 people on board, 5 of them children. Air traffic control saying there was no distress call, but villagers telling local police a low-flying plane hit the side of a mountain. Weather also a key factor with heavy rain, strong winds and fog. It's a harrowing wait for the family of those on board. Well known in Southeast Asia, Trigana Air Service is blacklisted elsewhere.
The European Union won't even let them in because of their safety compliance record in the past.
It's daybreak now in Indonesia, and weather forecasts call for more rain and fog, but villagers are providing some clues. They say they have found part of the wreckage.
Well, it's reported that far-right activists have canceled a march they planned to hold in Liverpool in northern England. The neo-Nazi demonstration was organized by the self-titled National Action Group. Local media were predicting it to be the largest and most visible neo-Nazi march to take place in the UK for decades. But now it's thought it was called off after coming under pressure from rival anti-fascist protesters. Plans to hold a neo-Nazi march triggered a storm of condemnation on Twitter, with users asking how it's even possible for an event like this to take place. Liverpool's mayor failed to ban the far-right demonstration and said organizers had threatened him. Ahead of the event, he released a letter sent to him by the National League. It says the city will, quote, go up in flames if authorities ban the march.
An important health warning about tick bites that could save your life. An Oklahoma mother, she lost all 4 limbs after she was bitten by a tick that was carrying a potentially deadly disease. It's called Rocky Mountain Spotted Fever. It's on the rise with about 2,000 reported cases each year. And ABC's Dr. Jen Atchen joins us with more. Good morning. Good morning, Jen. You know, we don't hear a whole lot about Rocky Mountain spotted fever. When we do, we associate it with the Rocky Mountains. Why are you concerned?
Well, here's what people need to know about this, Paula. This is a bacterial infection carried by some ticks. It has actually been reported all over the country, not just in the Rocky Mountain region, and it's been reported at all times of the year, although we are in peak tick season right now. It's been reported in urban areas, and it's even been found in people who have not been camping. So people need to know what the symptoms are. These are vague and they can mimic a lot of viruses. We're talking fever, headache, nausea, vomiting. That characteristic rash may not appear in everyone, and it can be difficult to see in people who have dark skin. So the key is, if there is a suspicion that these symptoms could be related to a tick bite, the recommendations are to start doxycycline antibiotics immediately, because time is of the essence.
Time is of the essence. You have to identify those symptoms within a small window.
And concerns about the plague forcing a popular campsite at Yosemite National Park to shut down. 2 squirrels just died of the disease at Tuolumne Meadows campground. The site is being closed on Monday for 5 days so the area can be treated with insecticide. The plague is spread by fleas. A child at a different Yosemite campsite came down with the disease after a visit earlier this summer.